Thanks for being here. Be sure to subscribe to Cheating Stories Best so you don't miss any new tales. Today's story revolves around a wife who sets out to sign a contract in another state for work, but things take a surprising turn. Let's dive in. It was one of those chaotic Mondays that seemed to stretch on forever. I was exhausted as I drove my F-350 down the long, winding road leading home. The sight of a sleek black stretch limousine parked in our circular driveway sent a jolt of unease through me. This was far from ordinary for our quiet suburban home, and a knot formed in my stomach as I pulled up to the curb. "Justine. I'm home," I called out, hoping for a cheerful response. Instead, silence lingered in the air, broken only by the soft sound of a coffee cup being set down. When I stepped into the living room, I found Justine sitting on the sofa, staring into her cup, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her demeanor felt heavy, and I knew instinctively that whatever awaited me wouldn't be good. "Sweetheart, is everything all right? What's with the limo?" I asked, my heart racing. Justine finally looked up, her gaze averted, and she took a deep breath before uttering those words that you dread to hear from someone you love. "Honey, something happened. We need to talk." Before I delve into the weight of that moment, let me introduce myself. I'm Martin Creed, but you can call me Marty. I'm the president of Coastal Construction, the largest commercial building firm in South Florida. My father founded the company back in 1947 and now enjoys semi-retirement, fishing and golfing while I manage the day-to-day operations. He still holds 100% ownership, and according to his will, I'm set to inherit everything. Until that day comes, I run the show, which I've been doing while following his lessons on hard work and integrity. Standing at 6 feet 1 inch with a solid build, many would label me as an alpha male, a term I find cliché. At heart, I consider myself more of a gentle giant. My father believed in teaching me the value of hard work from the ground up. I experienced my fair share of injuries on the job, concussions, broken bones, you name it, but those lessons forged my character. Alongside hard work, I learned early on the importance of honesty and respect, especially toward women. My father drilled into me that women are to be cherished, not humiliated. Growing up, I watched over my younger sister like a protective older brother. My upbringing taught me to treat women like delicate flowers. I believed they were to be honored and nurtured, a sentiment I carried into adulthood. I was never one to start fights. My size often deterred conflicts before they escalated. Though I've never actually been in a serious fight, I've intervened enough times to lose count. In relationships, my protective instincts and gentle approach shone through. I pampered my partners, showering them with affection. However, when it came to intimacy, I sometimes struggled to match that tenderness. My partners often told me they wished I were more affectionate, but it felt disingenuous to me. My instincts leaned toward a passionate possession, which made for exhilarating encounters, yet I could never master the softer side of lovemaking. I met Justine while working on a construction project for her building. We were an unlikely pair. I towered at 6 feet 1 inch, while she stood a delicate 5 feet 5 inches and weighed a mere 115 pounds. With long legs and a slender frame, Justine embodied femininity. She often dressed in her dance outfits, which accentuated her graceful figure. She was every man's dream, and I never thought I'd even be a contender for her heart. But chemistry sparked between us from the moment we met. Flirting became second nature, and before I knew it, I worked up the courage to ask her out for coffee after she called me out for being shy. To my surprise, we hit it off instantly. Our connection blossomed into a beautiful relationship filled with laughter and shared adventures. Justine loved our intimate roller coaster, frequently remarking that the men she dated before lacked the raw passion I brought to the bedroom. She was a whirlwind of energy, a rock star under the sheets, and I cherished every moment we spent together. Our differences, me, the big builder, and her, the fragile dancer, made for a fascinating couple. A year later, we tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony, and she thrived in the world of performing arts, both acting and dancing. Justine was adopted at birth by Carlos and Maria Bautista, a loving Cuban couple in Miami, and raised in a culture rich with Spanish traditions. Hispanic fathers often treat their daughters like princesses, and Cuban men are known for their strong sense of machismo. As I stood in our living room, my heart pounding and thoughts racing, I realized that whatever news Justine had for me was going to change everything. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the conversation ahead. Justine had always had a passion for dancing, but it wasn't just the art form that drew her in, it was the thrill of being in the spotlight. Most of the guys she associated with weren't the macho types you'd expect. In fact, many of them were dancers and actors, more concerned with their looks and egos than traditional masculinity. Justine thrived in this world, diving deep into modern dance, salsa, and rumba, winning awards and accolades along the way. After earning her degree in dance, her parents, recognizing her talent and ambition, opened a dance studio for her in Coral Gables, Florida. They envisioned it as a stepping stone to fame, and Justine quickly turned that vision into reality. Her studio flourished, buoyed by her reputation, her love for the arts, and their extensive family connections. South Florida was a hotbed for film, music videos, and international modeling shows, and Justine's talent and beauty soon attracted a clientele that included some of the biggest names in the industry. Taylor Swift, Camila Cabello, and Ariana Grande all came to her studio, and Justine found herself in the national spotlight, earning numerous American and Latin American dance awards. Enter Pierre Lauron, the hottest male dancer in the country. With his long hair, tall frame, and effortless charm, he was the epitome of a ladies' man. The tabloids couldn't get enough of him, capturing every moment of his extravagant lifestyle and rumored escapades with supermodels and Hollywood actresses. He had a reputation for breaking hearts and marriages alike, always surrounded by a cloud of controversy and allure. When Justine won her latest award, Pierre happened to be in Miami. He dropped by her studio, drawn to her vibrant energy and undeniable beauty. It was the first time they'd met since he had seen her in a stunning white dress at the award show. He was captivated, knowing he wanted to make her his. After some charming exchanges, Justine found herself enchanted by Pierre. They became engaged, and for a while, it seemed like a fairy tale. But just as quickly, the magic faded. Justine discovered Pierre in bed with another dancer, and her world shattered. The tabloids had a field day with the story, thrusting her into the limelight, not as the star she had worked so hard to become, but as the woman scorned. The betrayal cut deep. She had fallen head over heels for Pierre, thinking they would last forever. Anger coursed through her veins as she realized how deeply she had loved him. She ended the engagement and didn't speak to him again. In the aftermath, Justine found herself battling depression. Her father, furious, wanted to confront Pierre, but he was convinced to step back and wait. "Take your time," he told her, "before you do something you'll regret." A year passed before Justine met Martin, or Marty, as she affectionately called him. He was unlike any man she had ever known. Big, strong, and rugged, he was a breath of fresh air in a world full of polished, preening dancers. Marty didn't have a $200 haircut. In fact, he probably hadn't shaved in days. His rough exterior was balanced by a kindness and respect that made Justine feel safe. She found herself drawn to him, but he seemed oblivious to her advances. Frustrated by his lack of initiative, Justine finally confronted him one day as he was leaving the studio. "Marty, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Justine. What's on your mind?" "I've been asking around, and I know you're single. I've dropped so many hints, yet you haven't asked me out. Do you not like me, or did I offend you somehow?" Marty stood in stunned silence, his mouth agape. Finally, he managed to speak. "Are you kidding me? You're the prettiest woman I've ever seen. I'm sure every guy who works for me would kill to ask you out. But I didn't want to." "Why not?" Justine pressed, determined to get to the bottom of this. 2 reasons. First, you're my client, and it would be unprofessional. But the real reason? You're just so out of my league that I never thought you'd say yes to someone like me. Justine's laughter broke the tension in the air. You're a big fool, Marty. You treat me with kindness and respect, not like the other guys I know who just try to impress me. I find you incredibly attractive, and I want you to take me out on a date. Whatever we do, I promise I'll enjoy it. That day marked the beginning of a 2-year relationship that blossomed into marriage. Justine was fascinated by Marty's authenticity. There were no pretenses, no fake relationships, and no boasting. He was a powerful man who loved and respected her, treating her with tenderness. Yet, in the bedroom, he was a force of nature. Their intimate moments were passionate and wild, a stark contrast to her experiences with Pierre. One night, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Martin innocently asked about her previous lovers. When Justine compared their nights, saying that being with Martin was like heaven while being with Pierre was like, well, night and day, Martin's expression changed. Pierre never truly cared for you, did he? Martin said, a hint of protectiveness in his voice. No, he didn't. He was always focused on himself, Justine admitted, her heart swelling with gratitude for Martin. But deep down, I sometimes miss the tenderness that Pierre had. Despite that fleeting nostalgia, Justine was madly in love with Martin. They made love almost every night, their passion stronger than anything she had ever experienced. 5 years into their marriage, life was looking bright. Justine's dance studio was thriving, now managed by her younger sister, allowing Justine to focus on her choreography and explore new creative avenues. She had finally found happiness, leaving the shadows of her past behind. Carmela always admired her older sister, Justine, and had become her trusted partner in the dance studio. While Carmela lacked Justine's innate talents, she matched her in looks and outgoing nature, radiating youthful energy at just 23. Their dynamic complemented one another perfectly. Justine was the seasoned star, while Carmela was the vibrant force propelling the studio forward. Martin had recently stepped into the role of president of the company, taking over the reins from his aging father, who, at 92, was ready to pass the torch. The aging patriarch knew his time was short and had enlisted a lawyer to draft plans for the inevitable transition of ownership. Given the success of both businesses, both attorneys advised prenuptial agreements for the couple before they tied the knot. Surprisingly, neither Justine nor Martin had any objections. They agreed without hesitation, trusting each other completely. Justine was deeply in love with Martin, who treated her like royalty by day and a passionate partner by night. Their relationship thrived despite any physical differences. They were truly a match made in heaven. Justine often flaunted her stunning dance outfits, and every time Martin laid eyes on her slim, attractive figure, it ignited a fire within him. She enjoyed teasing him, reveling in the affection that flowed between them. Years prior, they had shared their individual stories of heartbreak. Justine knew of Martin's past, how Mary Jo had betrayed him with one of his closest friends, shattering his trust. Martin had expressed his deep disdain for cheaters, insisting that any relationship he entered would be exclusive. Justine, understanding the weight of such promises, assured him she would never give him a reason to be jealous. They both bore the scars of infidelity and committed to each other with vows they crafted together, pledging to honor those words with all their hearts. Now, 5 years into their marriage, their bond was stronger than ever, and they began planning for the next stage of their lives, starting a family. Justine's dance studio flourished under her guidance, and while Martin's career could support them without her income, she was passionate about her work. They discussed how she could begin transitioning responsibilities to Margaret, her lead dance instructor. However, something shifted one night when Justine revealed she wanted to delay starting a family for 6 more months. "I need to finalize a contract with the film studio," she explained. "I don't think Margaret is ready to handle the negotiations on her own." Martin nodded, understanding the importance of the opportunity. Justine detailed how the contract would take a couple of months to finalize and that her hard work could lead to greater success for the studio. Although he respected her ambitions, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease as their time together dwindled, their nights reduced to just once or twice a week. She promised that once this project was behind her, she would shake up his world and restore their normalcy. Martin tried to be understanding, but her increasing distance made him uneasy. One night, Martin returned home to find a limousine parked in front of their house. As he stepped inside, he spotted Justine lounging on the sofa, dressed in business casual attire. This was unusual for her. She typically wore her enticing dance outfits or comfy sweats at home, knowing how much it affected him. Tonight, something felt off. He sat beside her, and she took his hands, her expression apologetic. "Hey, I'm really sorry," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "This is all so sudden. I got a call this morning, and I didn't want to tell you over the phone. You know how we've worked with pop stars, right? Well, now Shakira and Selena Gomez are receiving performance awards at MGM this week, and they want me there to announce our new partnership." Martin's heart sank. "So you're leaving me to fly to Hollywood? To be with all those stars?" Justine nodded, her eyes softening. "Yes, but it's only for a few days. I promise you have no reason to worry. I love you, and this will be over before you know it. I've worked so hard for this, and I'm finally at the finish line. Please don't be upset." Martin felt a wave of frustration rise within him. "Justine, I've never interfered with your business or complained about your late nights. But I have a bad feeling about this trip. I'd rather you stay here with me. We don't need the contract or the money." With a sad smile, Justine replied, "Marty, I love you, but this has been my dream for years. Please trust me. I'll be back in your arms before you know it." Feeling defeated, Martin asked, "What's your travel itinerary? What airline are you on?" "I left the hotel information on the table," she said, "but I'm flying on a private jet, so I don't have a set schedule yet." "A private jet? Wow. Is it from a movie studio?" he asked, surprised. Justine hesitated, sensing the tension in the air before deciding to tell him the truth. "Actually, no. It's Pierre's plane. The studio arranged it." Martin's heart raced at the thought. Pierre was a notorious playboy in Hollywood, known for his extravagant lifestyle and flirtatious nature. A knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach as he imagined Justine flying off to be with him and all those stars. "Justine, please think this through. It's not just a business trip anymore. I don't like this." "I promise you, it's only business," she insisted, trying to reassure him. "I'll be back soon, and we can pick up where we left off. You just need to trust me." As she prepared to leave, Martin felt a mix of worry and helplessness. He wanted to support her dreams, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would change everything. Watching her walk out the door, he knew deep down that the night ahead would be long and restless, haunted by uncertainty and the fear of what might happen while she was gone. The next few days dragged on painfully, and as Martin waited for Justine to return, he found himself grappling with his feelings of insecurity and doubt. Would her ambition lead her down a path he couldn't follow? Would he still be her king when she returned, or would she find someone else among the stars? The questions echoed in his mind, each one more haunting than the last. And so, he waited, hoping that their love would withstand the test of time and distance. Justine felt a knot tightening in her stomach as she read the text from Martin, filled with both excitement and apprehension. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to step into a whirlwind of emotions. "Hey, Martin," she typed, her fingers trembling slightly. "I just found out that Pierre has an open seat on his private jet to France for the award ceremony. Since he'll be there, we should fly together." Her heart sank as she hit send, a rush of jealousy and anger bubbling up within her. The memories of the past few months flooded her mind, his growing distance, her unspoken fears. Justine couldn't help but wonder how Martin would react. She could almost feel the tension in the air. As expected, the hurt and pain flickered across his face when she shared the news. He didn't say a word, he just stood there, the silence growing heavier between them. Justine attempted to reach out, to comfort him, but he pulled away. She watched him walk out, unable to voice the tumult of emotions swirling in her chest. With a heavy heart, she stepped outside, got into her truck, and drove away, the weight of unspoken words lingering in the air like a fog. Tears streamed down her face as she left the house, knowing that Martin was hurting. She understood the difficulty of explaining the award ceremony and the necessity of attending it with Pierre. All she could do was pray that he would trust her enough to let her go. As she settled into the limousine, guilt washed over her. She regretted not being able to articulate her reasoning, the impulse to flee with Pierre nagging at her conscience. What if Martin never found out? This day had already gone awry. Justine had sensed trouble when the studio called her at noon, giving her a mere 5 hours to prepare. The unpredictable nature of the industry made her feel powerless, especially when it involved landing a deal with one of Hollywood's biggest studios. She had hoped Martin would be reasonable, but seeing him storm off left her feeling hollow. Too many people depended on her, and this was her dream come true. Why couldn't he understand? As the private jet soared through the clouds, she felt a pang of regret. "I can't believe I'm flying on Pierre's jet," she muttered under her breath. "I never intended to be in this position." She glanced at her phone, trying to reach Martin again, but no answer came. Instead, she sent him a message, pouring her heart out. "Marty, I love you. Please don't be angry. I had no choice but to go on this trip. I need you to trust me." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry for not telling you about Pierre's plane. It was arranged without my knowledge. You know how I feel about him. He means nothing to me." Justine's heart raced as she sent the text, wishing he would respond. "Please answer your phone when I call. I hate leaving things like this between us." But her phone remained silent, the absence of his voice sending a chill through her. Meanwhile, Martin wrestled with his emotions at a nearby bar. He sat at the counter, nursing a drink, anger simmering beneath the surface. "Here we go again," he muttered to himself, recalling past incidents that made him uneasy. "Justine flying off with Pierre? It smells rotten. I won't be silent this time." He shook his head, acknowledging that perhaps he was overreacting, but something about her behavior felt off. After reading her text, he tried to be rational. He knew he had to trust her, even if his instincts screamed otherwise. But as the evening wore on, he found himself growing more resentful, still unwilling to answer her calls. Later, when he returned home, his phone buzzed with a call from Carmela, Justine's sister. "Hey, big brother, it's me," she said gently. "Justine's feeling terrible about how she left. She cried after leaving you." "Yeah, well, she should," Martin replied, frustration lacing his tone. "It feels too random for her to leave like that, especially to fly with Pierre." "Martin, she had no choice," Carmela insisted. "If she wanted this contract, she had to go. None of us knew she'd be flying with him until this afternoon. She loves you, and nothing is going on." "I feel like a fool for trusting her," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I won't talk to her until she returns." "Stop it. Nothing is happening. It's just a business deal," Carmela urged. "I promise, everything will be back to normal next week." A last-minute trip to France with her ex-fiancé. "Sounds like more than just business to me," Martin scoffed. "Listen, are you coming to dinner tonight?" Carmela's voice softened, trying to diffuse the tension. "Sure, whatever," he muttered, still simmering with anger. As the evening wore on, he couldn't help but reflect on his relationship with Justine. Carmela was a spitting image of her sister, just a few inches taller, smart, and savvy with finances. She managed Justine's business affairs while she was away, and he respected her for that. They shared a bond as family, but never anything intimate. "Carmela, do you really think she would cheat on me?" he asked, vulnerability creeping into his voice. "Absolutely not," she replied firmly. "Justine is just overwhelmed with work. She loves you, Marty. You need to trust her." As Martin listened to Carmela, he found a flicker of hope that perhaps he could trust Justine, despite his fears. Would he be able to let go of his jealousy and accept her decisions? Time would tell, but the weight of uncertainty hung heavily in the air, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a tumultuous chapter in their lives. "I was completely devoted to Justine, and I only had eyes for her. But if I'm being honest, the moment I saw her walk into the restaurant in that fitted dress, her long legs gliding with confidence, it was like I was seeing her for the first time. I quickly pushed that thought aside and focused on enjoying dinner. When we finished, Carmela, my sister-in-law, insisted that I was being overly emotional. 'Just relax and trust Justine,' she said. She would have known if something was going on. The only thing more important to her than her business is you, her husband." Carmela went on to tell me how much Justine loved me, how she'd never seen her sister so happy. I listened and felt a bit better, but deep down, my instincts were still uneasy. At least the drinks and good company calmed my nerves enough for a good night's sleep. I turned off my cell phone, intent on ignoring Justine until she returned. I didn't want to deal with any of her calls or texts after the way she had left. Selena, my assistant for the last 5 years, was someone I trusted deeply. Originally from Montreal, she spoke fluent French, and I decided to share my concerns with her the next morning. As soon as she arrived, I laid everything out. "Maybe I'm being a jerk," I admitted, "but I can't shake this bad feeling about their trip." I asked Selena to find the best detective agency in Cannes and set up surveillance on Justine and Pierre. They would charge more for rush work, but I was willing to pay. I made it clear that I wanted this to be a priority. Of course, they were already familiar with Pierre's reputation from his past adventures, which made their job easier. I provided them with photos of Justine and the details of the hotel they were staying at, instructing them to send me any relevant pictures immediately. I wanted 24-hour surveillance along with a complete report of their daily activities. Before I even woke up the next morning, there were 12 photos waiting for me on my phone. To my utter disappointment, I saw my fears had been justified. The pictures showed Justine and Pierre together, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. They were smiling, hugging, and one photo captured the moment he held her hand as they walked toward the hotel. I may have acted out of jealousy, but now that jealousy was in control, and I couldn't ignore it. I asked Selena to book me the next flight to Cannes, returning the following day. I didn't need a hotel, I planned to be there for less than 24 hours. I was determined to confront this situation head-on, though I didn't have a concrete plan yet. Selena found a direct flight that departed that evening, arriving at 5:45 a.m. the next morning. I asked her to book business class so I could rest before facing them. I needed to be sharp when I confronted Justine. The detective agency sent me their room number, a 2-room suite. I prayed that Justine was telling the truth and that they weren't together in the way I feared. If it was just a kiss or some small intimacy, maybe I could forgive her and salvage our marriage. Flying business class and traveling light, I breezed through customs. Since today was our anniversary, I asked the taxi driver to stop at a flower shop, where I bought a dozen roses and 5 individual ones, one for each year we'd been together. It was a tradition we had upheld through the years. Wearing a COVID face mask, I set off and arrived at the hotel by 8:20 a.m. I knew that the awards party would keep people up late, which meant Justine and Pierre would likely still be in their room, either asleep or just waking up. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Before stepping out of the taxi, I adjusted my mask, pulled the hood of my jacket over my head, and tucked the flowers in one hand while slipping scissors into my pocket. My plan was simple, if not entirely sophisticated, I would pose as a flower delivery guy and head up to the 9th floor to suite 945. I intended to knock on the door with the flowers in hand, confident that Pierre would open it without suspicion. If he and Justine were together, I planned to confront him. I would give him a piece of my mind, and if he had been intimate with my wife, I would make sure to take some of his trademark long hair as a trophy. But if Justine had just kissed him, I'd walk away, leaving the flowers behind as a reminder of what I hoped was still possible for us. But my plans changed in an instant. As I walked toward the hotel's main entrance, my phone beeped with a new text message. Meanwhile, Pierre had woken up early, while Justine was still sleeping beside him. He planned to sneak out for a walk, grab some coffee, and bring it back to their room. Dressed quietly, he noticed Justine lying peacefully on the bed. Her wedding ring was resting next to her, glinting in the morning light. In a moment of reckless impulse, Pierre picked up Justine's phone from the nightstand. Using facial recognition, he unlocked it and took a photo of her, her wedding ring prominently displayed. He knew that her husband, Martin, would see the photo. Just as I reached for the hotel door, dread washed over me. I could feel the walls closing in, and my heart raced. I wanted to believe the best about Justine, but the evidence loomed large in my mind. Would I be walking into a confrontation that would shatter everything? Or would I find a glimmer of hope to cling to? As I stood there, the weight of my decision settled on my shoulders. I had to act, but how? The day ahead held so many possibilities, but all I could think about was the woman who held my heart and the man who threatened to take her from me. In another country, Justine found herself in a situation that was both thrilling and dangerous. Pierre, her persistent admirer, had an undeniable urge to let her jealous husband know just how much she was enjoying his company. Over the past month, despite Pierre's relentless advances, Justine had remained steadfast, always reminding him of her deep love for Martin and their fulfilling marriage. Each time Pierre tried to coax her into bed, she firmly rebuffed him, insisting their relationship was strictly professional. Yet, Pierre's ego wouldn't let it go, and in a moment of reckless arrogance, he decided to cross a line that would shatter lives. One fateful day, he snapped a photo of Justine in a moment of intimacy, feeling triumphant as he composed a message to Martin. He opened his messaging app, found Martin's name, and typed a smug message that dripped with arrogance. "Hey big guy, your wife is having a great time. Too bad you don't see us in action. I think I'll leave her here with me for a while." With a smirk, he attached the photo and hit send. Meanwhile, Martin stood in the hotel lobby, about to press the elevator button. As he felt his phone buzz, curiosity drew him to check the message. When he saw it was from Justine, he paused and opened it, his heart racing. The image of the woman he adored, bare and vulnerable, flashed on his screen, followed by the chilling message. In that instant, his world shattered. Frozen in place, he gripped the roses he had planned to surprise Justine with, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. Hatred bubbled to the surface, fueled by betrayal and pain. Just as he regained his senses, adrenaline surged through him, and he marched to the elevator, slamming the call button with determination. When the doors slid open, Martin was met with a shocking sight. Pierre, the man who had just cruelly taunted him, stepped out. Time seemed to freeze as Martin's mind raced back to the memories of Mary Jo's infidelity, a past that felt hauntingly familiar. The image of Justine, the love of his life, so carelessly displayed, ignited a fire within him. Without hesitation, he stood in Pierre's way, refusing to let him escape. Pierre, a head shorter, had no choice but to back away into the elevator. "Get out of the way, you idiot!" he barked, still too oblivious to recognize the danger he was in. But before the elevator doors could close, Martin's rage took over. Operating on pure instinct, he lunged at Pierre, grabbing his long hair and slamming his face into the steel wall of the elevator, rendering him unconscious. The old elevator creaked as it continued its ascent to the 9th floor, a vengeful ride for Martin. He left the roses atop Pierre's motionless body as he exited the elevator, feeling a strange mix of relief and horror wash over him. The encounter had lasted mere minutes, but the weight of his actions crashed down on him as he moved toward the stairs at the end of the hallway. Meanwhile, in Pierre's bed, Justine began to stir. Confusion clouded her mind as she realized she was alone, naked, and vulnerable. Panic gripped her heart as she tried to piece together the events of the previous night. She recalled Pierre's attempts to persuade her to spend the evening with him, but his advances had always been met with rejection. Suddenly, memories of a glass of champagne they had shared during a toast to their successful contract surfaced. Had he spiked her drink? The thought horrified her. Justine loved Martin deeply and would never do anything to betray him. Overwhelmed by guilt, she felt an urgent need to reach out to her husband, to explain everything. When she opened her phone, her heart dropped. There, on the screen, was the photo Pierre had sent to Martin, along with the message that spelled out her betrayal. Anger coursed through her veins like fire, and her heart raced with the need to confront Pierre. She had to fight for her marriage, to prove to Martin that she was a victim in this situation. Without wasting a moment, she threw on some clothes, determined to escape before Pierre returned. She pressed the elevator button, ready to head to the police station to file a report. As the doors slid open, her breath caught in her throat. The first thing she saw were the roses, and then, to her shock, Pierre lay unconscious on the floor of the elevator. Justine's mind raced as she tried to process the chaotic scene in front of her. How had this happened? Her heart pounded as she knelt beside Pierre, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. Justine knew she had to act fast, there was no time to waste. She had to save her marriage and ensure Martin knew the truth about what had transpired. In that moment, she understood that the battle for her love was just beginning, and she would do everything in her power to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Justine stared in shock at the bouquet of roses placed delicately on the table. There were exactly 17 of them, the same number Martin would have gifted her for their anniversary. Panic surged through her as she realized that today was the day they were meant to celebrate their love. Her heart raced as she contemplated the horrifying possibility that Martin might be in the hotel with Pierre. As the elevator doors slid open, her instincts kicked in. She dashed out, her voice rising in desperation. "Call an ambulance. Someone's hurt in the elevator." Without waiting for a response, she sprinted toward the main entrance, her mind racing. The street was bustling, and amidst the chaos, she caught sight of a tall figure slipping into a taxi. Her heart skipped a beat, it was Martin. Still reeling from the shock, she dashed down the street, waving her arms and shouting for the taxi to stop. Just as she reached the curb, a young girl on an electric scooter sped by, colliding into Justine with unforgiving force. The impact was brutal. She spun around and slammed into a fire hydrant, feeling a sharp pain tear through her leg. The world around her faded to black as she lost consciousness, the pain overwhelming. When she awoke, an hour had passed, and she found herself in a stark hospital room. Panic washed over her as she recalled the accident. She insisted that the doctors call the police to report what had happened. Outside, the paparazzi were already poised, eager for a scoop. They had caught images of her frantic exit from the hotel and of Pierre lurking nearby. The news would undoubtedly spin a scandalous tale, painting her as the centerpiece of a love triangle gone wrong. The police arrived, and as she recounted her ordeal, they listened intently. But when they mentioned that Pierre was in the hospital recovering from a concussion, her heart sank. What happened to him? She stammered, confusion and dread swirling within her. She couldn't shake the feeling that Martin was somehow involved. Had he followed her here? The thought sent shivers down her spine. "Mrs. Creed," one of the officers asked, "do you know who might have attacked Pierre?" She felt her heart race again, knowing she couldn't implicate Martin. "I don't know," she managed to say, shaking her head in denial. The officer's gaze hardened. "But you have a history with him. The press has reported extensively about your relationship with Pierre. Are you denying it?" Justine's world crumbled around her. "I never said that." I never spoke to the newspapers. God, he's not my lover. How could they twist my words like this? Martin will never believe me now. She felt tears stream down her cheeks as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. The officer noted her statement and promised to follow up. We'll check for any illegal substances, but you need to understand our position. You weren't with your husband at the time of the incident, and your ties to Pierre complicate things. Justine felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Martin is in the US. I don't want him to find out. I won't give you his information right now. Please, I just want to wait for the test results. Then you'll see I'm telling the truth and we can press charges against the man who tried to ruin my life. Just then, her doctor entered the room, sensing her distress. He gently asked the officers to leave, taking her hand in his. Mrs. Creed, you have a serious knee injury and will require surgery. We can either schedule the operation here or stabilize your leg for travel back to the US, but you need to address this before it gets worse. As anger bubbled within her over her injury, she felt a deeper despair at the thought of Martin seeing the tabloids filled with photos of her and Pierre. She wondered if he had already stumbled upon the damaging headlines and twisted stories. Desperate for answers, she tried calling Martin, but he didn't answer. Panic set in as she felt increasingly isolated. In her desperation, Justine called her father. Dad, I need your help. Something terrible has happened. Martin isn't answering my calls, and the media is saying things that aren't true. They've got photos of me and Pierre everywhere. Her father's voice crackled with fury on the other end. How could you do this to Martin? Why would you even entertain the idea of talking to that idiot Pierre after everything he did to you? I can't believe you would let yourself get dragged back into that mess. Dad, I never wanted any of this. I was just trying to make my career work. It was all part of a 3-day trip to sign contracts. I didn't want to see Pierre again, but the studio arranged everything without my knowledge. I didn't find out until it was too late. Her father sighed heavily, disappointment lacing his words. I'll send you home as soon as possible and arrange an appointment with a surgeon. I'll talk to your doctor and get everything sorted. But Justine, you could have lost everything. What were you thinking? As she hung up the phone, tears streamed down her face. The reality of her situation crashed down around her. She was trapped in a nightmare, alone and desperate, with the walls of her life crumbling beneath her. All she could do was wait, hope, and pray that Martin would understand the truth behind the chaos that had erupted around them. Justine sat on the hospital bed, her thoughts racing as she gazed out the window at the city below. That man is going to ruin my life again, she whispered to herself, guilt gnawing at her. I should have never gone. Dad, you have to believe me, she pleaded with Carlos, her father, who was sitting at her bedside, a look of concern etched across his face. I didn't do anything to deserve this. That idiot slipped something in my drink. Justine, I'll talk to Martin, Carlos assured her, trying to keep his voice calm. I'll explain everything. You just need to relax. I need to talk to him now. He saw that photo, and I know he'll never understand. Sweetheart, you don't have to talk to Martin until I've had a chance to explain what happened. We'll put you on a flight to New York tomorrow morning. You'll have surgery at NYU, and the doctors will sedate you. You won't be able to talk to him right now. Justine felt a surge of frustration mixed with sadness. I just want him to know I didn't choose this, she murmured, her voice trembling. 2 floors below, Martin was grappling with his emotions. Pierre's sudden outburst had left him shaken, and the photo he had seen haunted his mind. He paced back and forth in his small apartment overlooking Biscayne Bay, anger boiling inside him. That man needs to pay for what he did to Justine, he thought, seething. He had already contacted the police, demanding they find her attacker, but they had brushed him off. After all the trouble I've caused them over the years, why would they care now? Meanwhile, Justine's surgery went well, but the damage was severe. The road to recovery would be long and painful. After months of grueling physical therapy, she managed to walk without crutches or a cane, though a slight limp would remain. The doctors assured her that full recovery was possible, but it would take another year of hard work and dedication. Carlos had tried to reach out to Martin, but his words fell on deaf ears. Martin was too consumed by the pain of betrayal to listen. "I respect you and love Justine, but you have to understand," Martin said, his voice strained. "She went on that trip knowing I was against it. She made her choices, and now we have to deal with the consequences." Carlos felt a mix of sympathy and frustration. "Martin, she never wanted this to happen. You have to find a way to forgive her." "Forgive her? How can I? I still see her in that bed with him. I can't shake the image from my mind." Martin's heart ached as he spoke. "I never wanted it to end like this. I still love her, but I can't trust her anymore. The separation process has already started. If we can't work this out, we'll be divorced in a year." The weight of Martin's words hung heavy in the air. Carlos could only watch helplessly as Martin wrestled with his emotions, struggling to cope with the pain Justine had inadvertently caused. Justine returned home from the hospital to find their apartment empty. Martin had moved out, leaving behind only a letter, the photos of her and Pierre, and a sense of finality that crushed her heart. The letter read, "We both need time to heal. I understand what happened, and I'm sorry for your pain, but you made your choices. You should never have been alone with him in that hotel room. I warned you, and you went anyway. The separation agreement gives us a year to decide our future. If you want to finalize this sooner, let my lawyer know. I still love you, which makes this even harder, but I can't forget what I saw. You're going to have to live with the consequences of your actions." Justine sank to the floor, the letter slipping from her fingers. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I should have never been alone with Pierre. My ego led me to believe I was in control, but now I know how foolish I was." She thought about the joy she had felt at being offered the Hollywood contract, only to have it turn into a nightmare. "If I had just stayed home, none of this would have happened. Pierre would be a distant memory, and I'd be with Martin right now," she lamented, each thought stinging like a physical blow. "Why did I think I could handle it? Why didn't I listen to my instincts?" Justine buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "Now all I have is pain, loneliness, and regret. I want my husband back. I want my life back." The days turned into weeks, and the tears flowed freely every morning. Justine found herself trapped in a cycle of despair, longing for Martin's forgiveness and the warmth of his embrace. "If I can just get him to talk to me," she thought, "I know he'll remember how much we loved each other." But Martin remained distant, consumed by the haunting images of Justine in Pierre's bed. He wanted to erase those thoughts, but every time he considered reaching out, they pulled him back into a dark place. "I'm not ready to face her," he told himself. "Not yet." Justine clung to hope, believing that if she could just reach Martin, he would see how much she regretted her choices and how deeply she still loved him. "I can't give up on us," she vowed, wiping away her tears. "I know he loves me. I just have to find a way to show him that I'm worth fighting for." The journey to healing would be long and challenging, but Justine was determined. She would confront her mistakes and fight for the love that had once filled their lives with joy. In the depths of her despair, she found a flicker of resilience, a spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. "I will not let this be the end of my story," she promised herself. "I will fight for Martin, for us." Martin sat in his office, staring at his phone with a determination that wouldn't wane. He wouldn't give up, he had to keep trying to reach Justine. He needed to hear her voice again, to understand what had happened. She had been through so much, and so had he. Meanwhile, in France, the police were furious. The attacker who had caused so much chaos had escaped, and the media was relentless. The hotel security footage had captured the man entering the hotel, but the mask and hood obscured his identity. Although there was no concrete evidence tying Martin to the attack, the circumstantial evidence was heavy. His recent travels, coupled with the motive stemming from Justine's affair, painted a compelling picture that could easily lead to charges against him. The problem was that Martin was back in the US. The French authorities needed to extradite him to face these charges, but Carlos, Justine's father, had no intention of allowing that. With his connections and wealth, Carlos enlisted top-notch lawyers to block the extradition, determined to keep Martin safe. He despised Pierre just as much as Martin did and wanted to protect his daughter's interests. The only downside was that Martin was barred from visiting France for 7 years, or he would face arrest. Martin accepted this restriction with relief. He had no desire to return to a place filled with painful memories. He was thankful to Carlos for intervening, promising himself to hold on to hope for a reconciliation with Justine. 3 months had passed since the incident, and the public opinion had shifted dramatically. Initially, Pierre's fans expressed sympathy for him, but soon the truth of his deceitful nature came to light. The details of his numerous failed marriages were exposed, making him an outcast in the eyes of many. Justine, on the other hand, became a pariah. The fallout from her affair weighed heavily on her. Martin, in contrast, was perceived as the victim in all of this. Justine now lived alone in their spacious home, a stark contrast to the vibrant life she had once led. The negative publicity had cost her a lucrative contract with MGM Studios, and her injuries from the accident had hampered her dancing and teaching. Her business struggled under the weight of her tarnished reputation, leaving her feeling like a mere shadow of her former self. She fell into a deep depression, longing for Martin's return, desperately wishing to mend their broken relationship. Day after day, she called, leaving heartfelt apologies on his answering machine, her texts filled with pleas for forgiveness. "I'm so sorry, Martin. Please come back to me," she typed over and over, losing count of the messages she sent. Carlos even reached out to Martin multiple times, but deep down, he respected Martin's decision to take time apart. He hoped for reconciliation, knowing how much Justine loved him. Over the next year, Martin dedicated himself to his father's company, pouring 12 to 14 hours a day into its growth. His father, now retired at 93, enjoyed time with his wife, Millie, who was 89. After being alone for so long, Martin finally came to terms with the idea that Justine was a victim of circumstance. He wanted to find a way to bring her back into his life. He missed her laughter, her smile, her soft touches, and their tender kisses. Despite the anger that still simmered within him about her trip with Pierre, he realized that he still loved her deeply. He decided to reach out, hoping to reignite their connection. Justine happily agreed to meet for dinner at Mario's Garden, their favorite restaurant. Oddly enough, their meeting coincided with the night of their anniversary, just a month before their year-long separation would come to an end, at which point their divorce would be finalized. This dinner felt like a pivotal moment for both of them, a chance to explore whether reconciliation was possible. Arriving early, Martin brought 18 roses, eager to impress Justine. He spoke to Mario Cardui, the restaurant owner, sharing his hopes for the evening. "Tonight could mark a new beginning for us," he confided. If all went well, he asked Mario to deliver the roses to Justine after dinner. Mario, a romantic at heart, agreed, ready to help his old friend. When Justine finally walked in, Martin's heart raced. It had been a year since he'd seen her, and he was taken aback by how much he missed her. She walked with a slight limp from her accident, but as their eyes met, he quickly enveloped her in a strong embrace, holding her tightly. Justine's tears spilled as they made their way to the table, both of them overwhelmed by the moment. Over 2 bottles of wine, they spoke openly about their regrets and what had transpired in the past year. As they shared their thoughts and feelings, a sense of hope began to blossom between them. This dinner was meant to be a turning point, a chance to discuss their future, but neither of them knew how it would ultimately unfold. All they could do was hope for the best. Justine looked at Martin, a hint of uncertainty in her eyes as he waved to Mario, who had been circling their table all night. Moments later, Mario approached, delivering the roses to Justine. "Happy anniversary," he said warmly. "I missed you so much, and I want you back in my life," Martin confessed, his voice thick with emotion. As Justine's tears flowed freely, onlookers from nearby tables watched in awe. Martin knelt beside her, lifting her chin to meet his gaze before kissing her deeply. Applause erupted from the other guests, and several women sighed quietly at the romantic scene unfolding before them, one that many would remember long after the evening ended. Once Justine composed herself and released Martin from their embrace, they moved to the bar for an after-dinner drink. They cuddled and kissed, feeling the spark that had been absent for far too long. By the end of the night, she agreed to return to his apartment, ready to start over. For the first time since that fateful trip to France, they both felt joy and hope. Justine's depression seemed to lift, and Martin felt a renewed sense of purpose. They knew that together, they could weather any storm and face the future side by side. Martin smiled for the first time in a year. All he wanted was to hold Justine close and love the woman he adored. His heart ached from missing her. As they left the restaurant hand in hand, a man in a raincoat approached, almost deliberately bumping into them. Martin towered over the man, ready to give him an angry glare, but then he spotted the gleam of a chrome pistol. Before he could react, a loud bang rang out, and everything went black. When Martin regained consciousness, he found himself in a hospital room, disoriented and confused. Over the past year, Pierre had been consumed by rage and an insatiable desire for revenge. His life had spiraled out of control ever since Martin had exposed him for cheating Justine, leading to public humiliation, rejections from women, and a complete inability to find a job. The humiliation had become unbearable, and he hired a private detective to gather information about Martin. When Pierre learned about Martin and Justine's dinner plans, he decided it was time to put his plan into action. Getting his hands on a gun had been disturbingly easy, and the anticipation as he waited in the restaurant was electrifying. He saw them walking out together, lined up perfectly for his revenge. He slammed into Martin, forcing him to stop. In that moment, Pierre locked eyes with him, relishing the recognition that dawned on Martin's face. Then, without hesitation, he fired, aiming straight for Martin's stomach to inflict maximum pain and ensure a slow death. Justine's horrified scream pierced the night as she watched Martin collapse to the ground. She rushed to him, trying desperately to stop the bleeding while screaming for an ambulance. Meanwhile, Pierre fled the scene, but his escape was short-lived. Police apprehended him within an hour after Justine identified him as the shooter. Martin was rushed into surgery to remove the bullet, but despite the doctor's efforts, they could not stop the bleeding. 3 hours later, the surgeon emerged with grave news: Martin's condition was critical, and they were doing everything possible. Justine was allowed to see him for what would turn out to be their final moments together. She held him tightly, kissing him tenderly, her voice a whisper filled with desperation. "I love you so much, please don't leave me. I can't live without you. I've waited a year to have you back, and I won't let you leave me again." Martin opened his eyes and, with the little strength he had left, smiled at her. "I love you too, Justine." Their eyes locked, and she felt her heart shatter, knowing the man she adored was slipping away. Guilt consumed her. It was all her fault, and it tore at her from the inside. As she kissed him again, tears streamed down her face. The last memory Martin held was of Justine's sweet lips and her warm tears on his skin. When she finally broke the kiss, she realized he was gone. Her love, her rock, her reason for living had just left her. She collapsed against him, sobbing uncontrollably as her father stood nearby, gently stroking her shoulder. "Marty. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. Please forgive me. I will always love you, honey." She couldn't bear to let him go, and not a single person in the room was left dry-eyed. After a few moments, 2 nurses gently pulled her away from Martin, administering a sedative to calm her down. 6 months after the funeral and a long public trial, Pierre was found guilty of first-degree murder due to premeditation. The state had pushed for the death penalty, but the judge rejected that request. The lavish lifestyle and fame he once enjoyed were now memories, as he faced life in prison with only an hour of fresh air each day. His arrogance had led him to send that photo to Martin, transforming his once glamorous life into a living hell. The media and Hollywood turned their backs on him, withdrawing all support. Martin's father, Peter, died just a month after his son, unable to cope with the crushing weight of his loss. Millie, Martin's mother, lived on for another 5 years, determined to keep her husband's legacy alive. She sold the family business to the employees, ensuring it would thrive even after her departure. Immediately after Martin's death, Justine sold their house and moved into his apartment. It offered her a sense of closeness to the man whose life had been lost because of the chaos that unfolded that fateful weekend. She handed her dance business over to Carmela, retreating into seclusion to grieve her loss and the upheaval in her life. Justine cursed Pierre for ruining her life twice. The only time she felt a flicker of happiness was when she learned of his death in prison. Love, she realized, sometimes arrives like a beautiful dream, only to depart like a haunting nightmare. Subscribe to our channel so your partner doesn't betray you, the narrator chimed in, before teasing the next story. This tale is just the beginning. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. As I reflected on today's story, I couldn't help but feel that Justine had done the most unforgivable thing to her husband. Although she was a victim herself, she could have listened to him and made better choices. Instead, she followed her own path. What's your take? Share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.